really
Or for Mr. Colgate, could you example with the equipment issues? Are there any more specific concerns you would have, or what problems are you running into on the ground?
We're looking at here a variety of products that have come forward that are continuing to come out on the market that we're approached with of whether or not they're going to comply with our rules. I think what puts us, and I'll let Dr. Hayline comment on the NCAA perspective, is we're in a tough position where we can't test equipment. And so we're lending that to the manufacturers that they're producing equipment, one, that's going to comply with our rules, but two, that's not going to increase risk. One thing our sports medicine looks at is, peer-reviewed studies on equipment. Also going to look at the standards, how it's going to come out. A lot of the products that are coming out, they've got real big concerns of unintended consequences, especially a third-party aftermarket product that may be attached to an existing piece of equipment. And that's where we need some help online from equipment manufacturers, but also those that set standards on equipment, Consumer Product Safety Commission, Federal Trade Commission. We just need some help in this area right now.
Thank you.
My question is mostly for Bob Colgate, but also for Brian Hammond. On your slide, Bob, that you had under the 17 different rule books that you had on there, one of them was lacrosse, girls lacrosse too. So my question is whether you have different rules for different sports and what informs you on those rankings. And so it's really a question for both of you.
Okay, that's a good question. We use, for the girls' side of lacrosse, we use U.S. lacrosse rules. We do have a person on our staff that sits on their committee, but any changes that go away from that, and we're kind of going to refer to the national governing body on that. We're currently looking at writing our own rules for U.S. lacrosse, or girls' lacrosse right now. We do have rules for boys' lacrosse. That's being discussed. But right now, U.S. lacrosse has the experts in the area on the girls' side, and so we use their rules. But any changes that we have are incorporated into that rules that may say within their book for FHS play that may differentiate from U.S. lacrosse. But
my question is more broadly. Where you only have one rule. Do you have what informs you whether or not you're going to have different rules?
Year on that. We will have proposals come before our committees every year. We will make recommendations from our Sports Medicine Advisory Committee if there's things that need to be addressed. Our member state associates will propose things. The committee will look at things that need to be addressed. With that, they don't rewrite the whole rules. It's based on proposals that we get coming in on a yearly basis.
And there's a rules committee for every sport. You'll find you can look at, say, women's lacrosse and men's lacrosse, and they're not the same rules. So one of the goals is to bring that together, and for various reasons, some of them cultural, sometimes it's just the way things have been done. They've not always been together. Actually, this past weekend, we finished a 2-day concussion task force within the NCAA. So that was actually one of my first priorities, and we're taking that information, and one of the big things that we're doing is we're taking that and going back sport by sport. And it's not just looking at the rules of sport in general, but in particular, how can we shift the rules of sport so that we're really leveling the playing field and making concussion risk much less.
My question, Brian.
Please identify yourself first.
Eric Huang from UCSF. So you have the mission for NCAA is to keep mental and physical development is student athletes. One of the challenges that we have discovered in literature is that is kind of focus on the current status of the athletes while they engage in sports. After I graduate the program, then there's very little data out there in terms of following up their consequences of concussion they suffer during school, while in school. So my question is, does NCAA has any program that down this athlete long term, when they reach their 40s and long-term follow-up, that can monitor their cognitive development subsequently?
Some data right now, it's called the SCORES data, that actually has looked at physical and mental health of athletes long-term, but we've taken a deep dive into it. And so actually right before I came out here, I was just reviewing the applications. We just got approval for another postdoc, and we're going to specifically be looking into that. So we have a few goals. One is to look at this, it's called SCORES, S-C-O-R-E-S, to look at that data and to dive much more deeply into it, because we haven't had the bandwidth at the NCAA to do that, and now we have the approval for do that. But the goal is to set a Framingham-style study, because we have the opportunity to do that, and to do it in two ways. One is to, actually look at athletes, because we do have a rich resource, so we're able to tap into a large number of athletes 10, 20, 30 years out, and to do that at present, but also to set up a prospective database. So this is very much on our radar screen. I think it, where and was before, it wasn't up, and with the shift in direction, we're able to do that. So I'm pretty confident that you're going to be seeing something in the next couple of years on that.
Thank you. Is there a equivalent study for middle schools?
Are written for the varsity level athletes, just for competition only. A lot of our states will take our rules and use it for junior high. A lot of our state associations do regulate junior high. Some of our state associations do not regulate junior high. Some youth organizations do use our rules for a variety of youth sports, but here again, our rules writing process at the NFHS is strictly for at the high school level for the varsity athlete.
Way to answer that, and so and then with National Federation of State High School Associations, NCAA, we are working with Pop Warner, U.S. football, and also American Youth Football. But more importantly, next month we have an important meeting with the national governing bodies, and I think we don't always understand that the national governing bodies originally, they were really to develop youth sport. It's become more of an elite development, and so there was an Aspen at the Aspen Institute just last week, and there's a future one coming up in May, where we're going to try to engage the national governing bodies to really look at the rules of sport from really the bottom up, and so that there's a consistency there as well.
Great.
Brian, does the NCAA have any interest in or have a mechanism already in place for collecting data from participating colleges and universities to set up some sort of central database so you have information about injuries and confidence from the different campuses?
Priority. So at present, we contract out with a company called Datalist, and the problem is that we only have, it's out of 1,100 member institutions, only 120 are completely giving us all of their data. So we switched tactics, and again, this is all happening in the last 3 months, so it's a little quick. But we, for example, look at sports-specific data now. So we looked at hockey, and we now have over 50% of the NCAA schools that do hockey, and we're getting hockey-specific data. To be tennis, I know I should be doing football and all those other things for concussion, but we're having a conference in a couple of months on tennis, and we're going to use that as a rollout and as a model for all of the sports. So we have a sports-specific conference, and then we're going to contact all of the athletic trainers and the coaches and say, look, this is now the springboard for collecting data on all these sports. So our emphasis is shifting. We're going to try to do it sport-specific rather than institution-specific. But then we're also trying to work out with the bowl championship subdivision schools and to sponsor more football-specific data. Some of the problem is that all institutions collect data. There's not a bi-directional flow with Datalist, and so we're trying to. That's a trust thing that we have to develop. So we know the data is there, but we get the trust that it'll go bi-directionally, and then we're hoping that the football schools will take the lead and say, yes, we want to have all of these schools sharing the data with the NCAA. So it's there. We actually just, as of yesterday, I found out that we had a paper published or that accepted for publication on methodology for Datalist and how to get that moving forward. So it's another very, very huge interest for us.
Thank you. With exposure data as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
CRS Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Brian, you mentioned this kind of philosophical concept of changing rules, how that has to filter down to the youngest level and then kind of way up. Do you have any strategies on how best to do that when you have your coaches, many of which that game as a child and are ingrained in that set of rules? Now you're changing the game on them.
A lot of strategies and a lot of sleepless nights to go with that. But I think the biggest thing is if you look at just football, and we think there may be an opportunity for football, and then that becomes the model. Although I will say there are models out there. If you look at tennis model, where rules of tennis, for those of you who don't know, have changed. You can no longer, if you're 10 and under, you cannot play on a normal tennis court with a normal ball. So you have to play with a red, orange, or green ball, and you have to play on a smaller court. And there's been, other than a couple of outliers, there's almost universal buy-in for that. And the whole coaching philosophy of the USTA, we have the USPTA, the PTR, and all of the USTA coaches have completely bought into a long-term athlete development model for coaching. So that model is there. US Hockey has really done a tremendous job in sort of being out front. They actually recommend that you should not be on an ice rink more than 6 months a year. So we're hoping with football, working with Pop Warner, USA Football, American Youth Football, but it's not just going to be these organizations. It has to be very fundamental coaching strategies. And we understand it's a lot of mom and pop stuff. But the other thing is that the officials are a lot of mom and pop, too. You know, these are guys that have been out there. You know, they did a little bit of officiating in high school or college. So our long-term strategy is we actually videos, and we're really completely organizing what a proper coaching strategy is. It's a very ambitious agenda, but we feel in football there aren't national governing bodies. USA Football, they say they are, but they're really new to the game. They're funded by the NFL. But all of these other sports, for the most part, they have national governing bodies. So that's why I'm meeting with them next month, because if we get buy-in, and if we go back to the Amateur Sports Act, which it really was supposed to be, but then it was passed and not funded, like so many other things in this country. So, but if we get back and can work with the NGBs and then get the grassroots going again, it has to be with the coaches, officials, and parents. And, it's an ambitious goal, but honestly, it's the only way it's going to work. For us to succeed, we have to do two things. One is I could succeed in 100 things, but if I fail on concussion, failure. So that's first and foremost. But I think that's the most important issue out there. I think there are other issues, especially student-athlete mental health and burnout and overuse injuries. But our commitment to youth sport, and that's why that's even part of our vision statement, is unequivocal. And I think the only way we're going to succeed is to have a bridge with them. But also, at the same time, I think the NCAA is uniquely positioned perhaps to play that leadership role.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the panel.